It began as a routine state banquet preparation inside Buckingham Palace, another carefully choreographed royal event where every detail was meant to reinforce unity. But behind closed doors, palace staff were whispering about something far more explosive. Seating charts were being revised. Protocol officers were holding emergency consultations. And one unexpected decision by King Charles would soon leave senior royals stunned, courtiers scrambling, and the entire nation asking the same question: why had the king publicly chosen Catherine over Camilla? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, nobody outside palace walls suspected that anything unusual was unfolding. State banquets were among the most carefully managed events in royal life, built upon decades of tradition and countless layers of protocol. Every guest placement carried meaning. Every speech was reviewed repeatedly. Every appearance was calculated with extraordinary precision. Yet this particular banquet was different. Senior palace aides reportedly found themselves dealing with a series of unexpected alterations that seemed to appear almost overnight. Long-established ceremonial arrangements were quietly revisited. Discussions that normally required only routine approval suddenly became subjects of intense debate. Those who had spent years navigating royal protocol began exchanging uneasy glances as questions surfaced that nobody seemed willing to answer directly. The uncertainty deepened when Princess Catherine received an unexpected invitation to meet privately with King Charles. The meeting was not listed on the public schedule. It was not announced to the press. Even among palace staff, details remained tightly controlled. That alone was enough to trigger speculation. Royal insiders had become accustomed to private consultations between senior family members, but this situation felt different. The atmosphere surrounding the gathering carried an unusual sense of urgency. Advisors moved carefully. Conversations ended abruptly whenever certain names entered the room. More importantly, reports began circulating that Queen Camilla had not been included in several key discussions connected to the upcoming event. For many observers, that detail immediately raised concerns. The monarchy had spent years presenting a united front despite periods of intense public scrutiny. Any suggestion of exclusion at the highest levels naturally attracted attention. Yet the palace remained silent. No explanations were offered. No clarifications emerged. The absence of information only fueled greater curiosity. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Some believed the king was preparing to make an important announcement. Others suspected a broader shift was underway, one connected not merely to a single banquet but to the future direction of the institution itself. Then came the moment that truly intensified the mystery. When Catherine emerged from her private meeting with the king, those who saw her noticed something impossible to ignore. She appeared composed, gracious, and fully in control. Yet there was also an unmistakable emotional weight surrounding her. It was as though she had just been entrusted with information carrying enormous significance. She offered no public comment. She revealed nothing directly. But her demeanor sparked a fresh wave of speculation among those already watching developments closely. What had Charles told her? Why had the meeting been arranged so suddenly? And why were so many palace officials behaving as though something monumental was approaching? As the days passed, the rumors became increasingly difficult to contain. Journalists began hearing fragments of conversations from sources connected to royal circles. Commentators noted subtle changes in scheduling decisions. Even longtime observers of the monarchy sensed that a larger story was beginning to emerge beneath the surface. More than one insider suggested that the king had been reflecting deeply on the future image of the crown and the individuals who would ultimately carry its reputation forward. Whether those reports were accurate remained unclear, but one fact became impossible to dismiss. Something significant had changed inside Buckingham Palace, and the effects were already spreading through every level of royal life. The public, however, still knew nothing of the deeper tensions developing behind closed doors. They saw preparations for a grand diplomatic occasion. They expected the familiar pageantry and carefully managed symbolism that accompanied such events. What they did not realize was that the banquet was rapidly becoming the focal point of a much larger story, one involving loyalty, trust, public perception, and the delicate balance of influence within the royal family itself. The questions continued multiplying while answers remained frustratingly out of reach. And as anticipation surrounding the event grew, so too did the sense that King Charles was preparing to send a message that would resonate far beyond a single evening. But the banquet itself was only the stage. The real story began weeks earlier, when the king quietly started reconsidering the future image of the monarchy. Long before guests arrived beneath glittering chandeliers, a subtle transformation was already underway. Few people noticed it at first. Yet inside palace corridors, patterns were changing. Loyalties were shifting, and Catherine's influence seemed to be growing with every passing week. The questions surrounding that private meeting with King Charles did not disappear after Catherine left the room. If anything, they multiplied. Palace insiders who had initially dismissed the speculation as routine royal gossip soon found themselves paying closer attention to a series of developments that seemed increasingly difficult to ignore. What began as isolated whispers gradually formed a larger picture, one suggesting that the king was relying on Catherine in ways that extended far beyond ceremonial duties. At a time when the monarchy faced enormous pressures and constant scrutiny, Charles appeared to be looking toward figures he believed could strengthen public confidence in the institution. Again and again, Catherine's name surfaced at the center of those discussions. For years, Catherine had built a reputation based on patience, discipline, and a willingness to place duty ahead of personal attention. She rarely sought the spotlight, which made the growing focus on her all the more remarkable. Public admiration for the Princess of Wales had reached extraordinary levels, and many royal observers believed her popularity had become one of the monarchy's greatest assets. While controversies came and went, Catherine remained a reassuring presence. She represented stability during uncertain times. She represented continuity when questions about the future seemed unavoidable. Most importantly, she had earned a level of trust that few public figures could claim. Reports from within royal circles suggested that Charles understood this better than anyone. The king had spent decades preparing for a role that finally became his, only to find himself facing challenges few could have predicted. The burden of leadership weighed heavily upon him, and according to those familiar with palace operations, Catherine increasingly became someone whose judgment he valued. Private consultations reportedly became more frequent. Her perspective was sought on matters that extended beyond her traditional responsibilities. Advisors who once viewed her primarily as the future queen now began speaking about her as one of the monarchy's most influential figures in the present. Not everyone failed to notice these changes. Camilla remained an active and significant member of the royal family, but even loyal supporters reportedly recognized that certain responsibilities were gradually shifting. Engagements that might once have highlighted other senior royals increasingly seemed designed to showcase Catherine's role. Important initiatives began carrying her unmistakable influence. Charitable projects received greater attention when associated with her name. Public responses were overwhelmingly positive, reinforcing a cycle that only strengthened her position further. Meanwhile, media commentators started asking increasingly bold questions. Was this simply a natural evolution within the royal family, or was something more deliberate taking place? Some analysts argued that Charles was quietly preparing the monarchy for its next era. Others believed he was responding to public sentiment by elevating the figure many viewed as the institution's strongest connection to future generations. Whatever the explanation, one thing became clear. Catherine's presence was expanding at precisely the moment when the monarchy was searching for renewed confidence and direction. Yet with every new responsibility came a corresponding rise in tension. Palace officials worked hard to preserve the appearance of harmony, but beneath the surface, uncertainty was growing. The more Catherine's influence increased, the more speculation intensified about what it might mean for everyone else. Every appearance was examined. Every decision was scrutinized. Every interaction became part of a larger narrative unfolding behind closed doors. What had begun as subtle shifts in responsibility was evolving into something far more significant, something capable of reshaping relationships at the highest levels of royal life. And as those quiet changes continued gathering momentum, attention slowly turned toward a single event that would soon place all those hidden dynamics under an unforgiving spotlight. Few people realized it yet, but the banquet that appeared to be another routine royal occasion was rapidly becoming the stage upon which months of shifting influence, growing trust, and unspoken tensions would finally reveal themselves to the world. As Catherine's role expanded, one upcoming state banquet suddenly became far more significant than anyone outside palace walls could have imagined. The evening arrived with all the grandeur expected of a royal state banquet. Foreign dignitaries gathered. Cameras flashed. Every movement followed centuries of tradition. Then came a moment so unexpected that even experienced royal observers struggled to explain it. For weeks, anticipation surrounding the event had been building steadily. Officially, it was another important diplomatic occasion designed to strengthen international relationships and showcase the enduring prestige of the British monarchy. Unofficially, however, there was a growing sense that something unusual was about to unfold. The whispers that circulated through palace corridors now seemed to hover over the evening itself. Those who had been following the subtle shifts inside Buckingham Palace arrived with heightened curiosity, wondering whether the rumors surrounding Catherine's expanding role would finally reveal their true significance. As guests assembled and formal proceedings began, expectations naturally centered on King Charles and Queen Camilla. That was how such occasions traditionally unfolded. The sovereign and consort occupied the symbolic heart of the event, embodying continuity, authority, and national representation. Yet almost immediately, seasoned royal watchers began noticing details that felt different from previous state banquets. Nothing was dramatic enough to trigger immediate headlines. Nothing openly violated protocol. But the arrangement of certain ceremonial responsibilities appeared to signal a quiet yet unmistakable change. The deeper the evening progressed, the more difficult those changes became to ignore. Catherine found herself occupying a position of remarkable prominence, one that naturally attracted attention from both guests and observers. Conversations seemed to flow toward her. Distinguished visitors appeared eager to engage with her directly. Senior representatives who might normally focus their attention elsewhere repeatedly sought opportunities to interact with the Princess of Wales. Each individual moment seemed small in isolation, but together they created a pattern that few could overlook. Inside royal circles, patterns often matter more than announcements. A monarchy built on symbolism communicates through gestures as much as through words. That reality was not lost on experienced commentators covering the event. Almost immediately, discussions began emerging about the significance of Catherine's visibility. Some viewed it as a reflection of her growing popularity. Others suspected it represented something much more deliberate. The questions that had been circulating privately for weeks were suddenly being asked publicly. Why was Catherine receiving such extraordinary attention? Why did so many aspects of the evening appear to place her at the center of key interactions? As the night continued, public interest shifted almost instinctively in her direction. Media coverage that initially focused on the banquet itself gradually began concentrating on Catherine's role within it. Analysts dissected every detail. Commentators revisited recent developments involving the Princess of Wales. The broader narrative that had been quietly forming behind palace walls now seemed impossible to contain. Many observers began wondering whether they were witnessing the early stages of a significant transition in the monarchy's public image. At the same time, another reality added tension to the unfolding story. The more attention Catherine received, the more questions arose about everyone else. Royal events are rarely interpreted in isolation. Every gesture creates comparisons. Every decision invites speculation. The growing spotlight on Catherine inevitably intensified scrutiny of existing royal dynamics, particularly given the rumors that had already emerged about shifting responsibilities and changing priorities within the institution. What made the atmosphere so compelling was the uncertainty. Nobody knew exactly what it all meant. There was no official explanation. No statement clarified the significance of the evening's subtle departures from expectation. Instead, observers were left piecing together fragments, searching for meaning in developments that seemed too consistent to be accidental. The banquet was becoming more than a diplomatic occasion. It was becoming a stage upon which deeper questions about influence, trust, and the future direction of the monarchy were quietly playing out before the world. Yet even as journalists rushed to analyze what they had witnessed, and commentators debated the implications, they remained unaware that the most consequential development of the evening was still waiting to unfold. The subtle shifts that had captured attention throughout the banquet were only preparing the ground for something far more dramatic, a moment that would transform speculation into national conversation, and leave even the most experienced royal observers struggling to comprehend its significance. Yet the most astonishing moment had not happened yet, and when it did, it would dominate headlines across the United Kingdom. Then came the moment no one expected. In front of international guests, government officials, and global media, King Charles made a choice that instantly transformed the atmosphere inside the room. The message was unmistakable, and everyone present understood its significance. For most of the evening, speculation had remained exactly that, speculation. Observers had noticed Catherine's growing prominence. Commentators had questioned the subtle changes in protocol. Journalists had exchanged theories about the deeper meaning behind her unusually visible role. Yet none of those developments prepared anyone for what happened next. In a monarchy built upon tradition, every ceremonial gesture carries weight. Every public decision sends a message. And when King Charles made his move, it was immediately clear that this was not a routine moment hidden within a larger event. This was something far more significant. The decision itself unfolded during one of the banquet's most important ceremonial moments, when attention naturally focused on the senior members of the royal family. Expectations remained firmly centered on the King and Queen Camilla. That was the pattern everyone anticipated. That was the tradition everyone understood. Yet instead of reinforcing familiar expectations, Charles directed extraordinary attention toward Catherine. In a single moment, he elevated her position in a way that instantly became the defining story of the evening. The reaction was immediate. Those present may have maintained their composure, but royal observers quickly recognized that something highly unusual had occurred. Experienced commentators who had covered the monarchy for decades struggled to recall a comparable situation. Some described it as symbolic. Others viewed it as strategic. A few even suggested it represented a glimpse into the future. Regardless of interpretation, nobody questioned its importance. The significance was impossible to ignore. What made the moment even more remarkable was how naturally Catherine carried the responsibility placed before her. She did not appear to seek attention. She did not attempt to dominate the occasion. Yet as the evening progressed, she became the undeniable focal point. Conversations returned to her. Analysis centered on her. Public fascination gravitated toward her. The same qualities that had steadily strengthened her reputation over the years now seemed to place her at the very heart of the monarchy's evolving story. At the same time, another reality fueled growing speculation. As Catherine's visibility increased, Camilla's presence appeared noticeably reduced. That contrast immediately became impossible to separate from the broader narrative that had been developing for weeks. Observers who had already been questioning shifts in palace priorities suddenly found fresh reasons to wonder whether deeper changes were underway. Had Charles deliberately chosen this moment to signal something important? Was he responding to public sentiment? Or was he quietly preparing the monarchy for challenges still hidden from public view? The uncertainty only intensified as reports from inside royal circles began circulating after the event. Palace insiders were said to be surprised by the magnitude of the gesture. Even among those familiar with recent developments, the public nature of Charles's decision reportedly exceeded expectations. The king had not simply acknowledged Catherine's growing importance. He had done so on one of the most visible stages available to the monarchy, ensuring that the message would reach audiences far beyond the banquet itself. Within minutes, reactions spread across news outlets and social media platforms. Clips, photographs, and commentary dominated online discussion. Supporters praised Catherine's growing role. Critics questioned the implications. Royal experts filled television broadcasts with competing interpretations. Every detail was dissected. Every possibility was explored. The public was no longer discussing whether Catherine's influence was expanding. That question had already been answered. The debate had shifted toward understanding why it was happening and what it meant for the future. Yet beneath the flood of headlines, viral reactions, and public debate, an even more intriguing conversation was taking place where cameras could not reach. While millions focused on the spectacle they had witnessed, those working closest to the monarchy were quietly discussing developments that suggested the banquet might represent only one piece of a much larger transformation. And as those private conversations continued, they hinted at revelations that could prove even more dramatic than the moment that had just captivated the nation. While the public focused on what happened inside the banquet hall, palace staff were already discussing something even more revealing behind the scenes. Within hours, Buckingham Palace found itself at the center of a storm. Courtiers exchanged hurried messages. Advisors fielded questions from journalists. And throughout royal circles, one subject dominated every conversation. The state banquet had ended, but the story it created was only beginning. What had initially appeared to be a single surprising moment quickly evolved into a national obsession. Across newsrooms, television studios, and royal commentary programs, analysts raced to understand what they had witnessed. The public sensed that something important had happened, even if nobody could fully explain it. The symbolism was too powerful to dismiss. The timing was too precise to ignore. And the questions surrounding King Charles's decision only became more urgent with each passing hour. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere reportedly grew increasingly tense. Staff members found themselves navigating a flood of speculation, unlike anything they had anticipated. Questions arrived from every direction. Journalists sought clarification. Commentators demanded context. Royal watchers searched for answers hidden within months of subtle developments that now seemed connected. Yet official responses remained carefully measured. Palace representatives avoided feeding the growing frenzy, but their silence often generated even greater curiosity. In the absence of explanations, theories multiplied. Royal experts soon found themselves divided into competing camps. Some believed the king's decision represented a deliberate signal about the future of the monarchy. They argued that Charles understood the institution stood at a crossroads, and that his actions reflected a desire to strengthen public confidence in the next generation of leadership. According to this interpretation, the banquet had not simply highlighted Catherine's importance. It had showcased the person many believed would help carry the monarchy through its next chapter. Others viewed the situation differently. Rather than seeing a strategic message about succession and future planning, they interpreted the gesture as recognition of Catherine's years of service, resilience, and growing connection with the public. They pointed to her consistent dedication, her ability to maintain dignity during periods of intense scrutiny, and the trust she had earned from millions of people. From this perspective, Charles was simply acknowledging what much of the country already felt. Catherine had become one of the monarchy's strongest assets, and her prominence reflected that reality. Yet regardless of which explanation people preferred, one fact remained impossible to escape. The discussion was no longer centered solely on the king. It was centered on Catherine. Every debate returned to her. Every headline featured her name. Every analysis examined her expanding influence. That shift alone was extraordinary. For years, royal conversations had revolved around established hierarchies and familiar power structures. Now, attention seemed to be moving in a different direction. At the same time, reports suggested that some of Camilla's supporters viewed developments with growing unease. They questioned the meaning behind the banquet's symbolism and worried about the narratives emerging in its aftermath. Whether those concerns were justified remained unclear, but their existence added another layer of intrigue to an already complex situation. The more Catherine's profile rose, the more observers searched for implications elsewhere within the royal family. Soon, the story expanded beyond Britain. International media organizations began covering the banquet with remarkable intensity. Newspapers, broadcasters, and online platforms across the world analyzed every aspect of the event. What had started as a domestic royal story transformed into a global conversation about the future of the British monarchy. Foreign commentators offered their own interpretations. International audiences became invested in the mystery. The king's decision resonated far beyond palace walls. As coverage intensified, public interest reached extraordinary levels. Online discussions exploded, opinion columns multiplied, every new detail fueled fresh debate. Yet despite the endless analysis, a deeper question remained unresolved. Why had Charles chosen this moment? Why now, after months of quiet changes and growing speculation? The answer, many believed, could not be found in the banquet alone. To truly understand the reactions sweeping through the palace, the media, and the public, it was necessary to look beyond a single evening and examine the broader concerns shaping the king's thinking. Because behind every headline, every theory, and every whispered conversation lay a larger story. One connected not merely to Catherine's rise, but to Charles's growing awareness of how his reign might ultimately be judged by history. But understanding the reaction required understanding something even larger: the king's growing concern about how history would remember his reign. For years, discussions about the future of the monarchy centered on William's eventual reign. Now, however, another figure had become impossible to ignore, and according to many observers, Charles understood exactly what that meant. As the debate surrounding the state banquet continued to dominate headlines, attention gradually shifted away from the event itself and toward a much larger question. Why had King Charles appeared so determined to elevate Catherine at such a critical moment? To understand that, many royal observers argued it was necessary to look beyond a single evening and examine the broader concerns that had been shaping the king's thinking for months. The answer, they believed, was rooted in legacy. Every monarch eventually faces the same challenge. Beyond ceremonies, public appearances, and constitutional duties lies a deeper concern: how history will judge their reign. For Charles, that question carried particular weight. He had waited decades to become king, inheriting an institution that had survived generations of change, crisis, and reinvention. Yet modern challenges were unlike anything previous eras had faced. Public expectations evolved rapidly. Trust had become increasingly fragile. Maintaining confidence in the monarchy required more than tradition alone. It required figures capable of connecting the institution to the future. Increasingly, Catherine appeared to represent exactly that connection. What made her influence so powerful was not simply popularity. Popularity can rise and fall. Public admiration can shift with changing circumstances. What Catherine seemed to possess was something far more valuable: credibility. Across different generations and different audiences, she was increasingly viewed as a symbol of stability. At a time when uncertainty often dominated public discussion, she projected consistency. At a moment when many institutions struggled to maintain trust, she inspired confidence. Those qualities were becoming central to conversations about the monarchy's long-term future. Reports from royal commentators suggested that Charles recognized this reality. While official discussions remained private, many observers believed the king valued Catherine's approach to public service. She rarely sought controversy. She focused on duty rather than attention. Her commitment appeared steady rather than performative. In many ways, those qualities reflected values the monarchy had put generations trying to preserve. As public trust became one of the institution's most important assets, figures capable of strengthening that trust naturally assumed greater importance. That reality also fueled comparisons to some of the most respected figures in modern royal history. Commentators frequently pointed to the quiet strength, resilience, and sense of responsibility associated with previous generations of senior royals. While every individual was different, many believed Catherine embodied qualities that the public traditionally admired within the monarchy. Such comparisons only reinforced perceptions that she represented continuity during a period of transition. As a result, new questions began emerging with increasing frequency. What role would Catherine ultimately play in shaping the monarchy's future? How much influence would she hold as William moved closer to eventual kingship? And perhaps most significantly, was Charles already helping prepare the public for a future in which Catherine would become one of the institution's defining figures? These questions remained unanswered, but their growing prominence reflected a broader shift taking place within public conversation. The state banquet had accelerated that shift dramatically. What once seemed like quiet speculation was now part of a national debate. Analysts discussed succession planning. Royal experts examined changing dynamics. Ordinary citizens found themselves considering what the monarchy might look like in the years ahead. The event had transformed Catherine from an important member of the royal family into a central figure in discussions about the institution's future direction. Perhaps that was why the moment resonated so deeply. It was not simply about one ceremonial gesture. It was about what that gesture appeared to represent. For many observers, the monarchy seemed to be entering a new chapter, one shaped by evolving priorities, changing public expectations, and emerging leadership figures. Charles's actions at the banquet were increasingly viewed through that lens, not as an isolated decision, but as part of a broader story still unfolding. Yet even as commentators debated the future and analysts explored the implications of Catherine's growing prominence, another question continued to linger in the background. It was a question that refused to disappear because it touched upon the most sensitive aspect of the entire story. If Catherine's rise carried such profound significance, what impact did it have on Camilla, whose role had long been intertwined with the king's public image and royal journey? As debate intensified across the country, one final question remained unanswered. What did this moment mean for Camilla herself? No matter how commentators interpreted the banquet, one reality could not be ignored. Every decision inside the royal family carries consequences. And this particular decision placed Camilla in an uncomfortable spotlight she had not anticipated. As the national conversation intensified, attention inevitably turned toward the person many believed had been most affected by the evening's events. For days, headlines had focused on Catherine's growing prominence and King Charles's surprising public gesture. But the more those stories dominated public discussion, the more another question emerged. If Catherine's position had been strengthened so visibly, what did that mean for Camilla? It was a sensitive topic, one that palace officials appeared determined to avoid addressing directly. Yet the absence of answers only encouraged deeper speculation. Media scrutiny quickly shifted in her direction. Commentators who had initially concentrated on Catherine's role began examining the broader implications for royal dynamics. Every previous appearance, every recent engagement and every subtle change in protocol suddenly became part of a much larger discussion. Analysts searched for patterns. Journalists revisited old assumptions. The public began connecting developments that had once seemed unrelated. In doing so, they transformed a single banquet into a wider debate about influence, perception, and position within the monarchy. Supporters of Camilla were quick to defend her contributions. They pointed to years of public service, countless engagements, and the often difficult path she had traveled to reach her current role. They argued that reducing the story to a simple comparison between two royal women ignored the complexity of the institution itself. To them, Camilla remained an important figure whose work deserved recognition. They viewed attempts to portray the banquet as a setback for her as unfair and overly simplistic. Yet critics saw matters differently. They focused on symbolism, the language through which monarchies often communicate their intentions. From that perspective, the significance of Charles's decision could not easily be dismissed. They argued that royal events are carefully planned, particularly those involving international attention. Every placement, every interaction, and every ceremonial moment carries meaning. Therefore, they believed the prominence granted to Catherine represented something deliberate. Whether it reflected changing priorities, future planning, or simply recognition of public sentiment remained open to debate, but the symbolism itself was difficult to ignore. Inside Buckingham Palace, officials reportedly remained cautious. No public effort was made to clarify the deeper significance of the banquet. No direct response was offered to the growing theories dominating news coverage. That silence created an information vacuum, and in royal affairs, vacuums rarely remain empty for long. New interpretations emerge daily. Some suggested the evening marked the beginning of a significant transition. Others argued that observers were reading too much into a single event. The absence of certainty only made the story more compelling. Meanwhile, public fascination reached extraordinary levels. Newspapers featured extensive analysis. Television panels devoted hours to discussing possible implications. Online conversations expanded far beyond Britain, drawing attention from audiences around the world. What had started as a ceremonial occasion now seemed to symbolize something larger. Questions about hierarchy, influence, and future leadership increasingly dominated the conversation. People were no longer debating what happened. They were debating what it meant. That distinction mattered because the story had evolved beyond personalities alone. It had become a reflection of broader concerns surrounding the monarchy's future. Every interpretation revealed deeper anxieties about change, continuity, and succession. Every theory hinted at larger forces shaping the institution behind closed doors. And while the spotlight remained fixed on Catherine and Camilla, many observers sensed that an even more important narrative was emerging beneath the surface. Because in the end, the banquet was never solely about one royal receiving greater attention than another. It was about what that attention represented. It was about a monarchy confronting its future while carrying the weight of its past. And as the public continued debating the implications, a deeper truth slowly began coming into focus, one that's extended far beyond palace rivalries and media speculation. Yet beyond the speculation, beyond the headlines, and beyond the palace intrigue, the deeper significance of the evening was only beginning to emerge. What happened at that state banquet may ultimately be remembered as more than a single royal moment. It may be remembered as the night the future stepped into the spotlight while the present quietly moved aside. As the immediate controversy began to settle, a larger realization started taking hold across the country. The endless debates about seating arrangements, ceremonial gestures, and royal symbolisms were no longer the true story. Those details had simply opened the door to something much bigger. What captured the public imagination was the growing belief that they had witnessed a glimpse of the monarchy's future unfolding in real time. And at the center of that future stood Catherine. The reaction was extraordinary. Days after the banquet ended, public discussion remained overwhelmingly focused on the Princess of Wales. Newspapers continued publishing analysis. Television networks revisited the event repeatedly. Online conversations showed little sign of slowing down. What fascinated people was not merely Catherine's presence during the evening, but what her prominence seemed to represent. For many observers, she had become the embodiment of stability during a period marked by uncertainty. Her rise appeared neither sudden nor accidental. Instead, it felt like the culmination of years spent quietly building trust, credibility, and public admiration. Meanwhile, King Charles's decision evolved into one of the most discussed royal stories of the year. Every new commentary seemed to uncover another possible interpretation. Some viewed it as a strategic signal about the monarchy's long-term direction. Others believed it reflected the king's personal confidence in Catherine's ability to help safeguard the institution's future. Regardless of perspective, most agreed on one thing: the banquet had become a defining moment. It was no longer simply a diplomatic event. It had transformed into a symbolic marker within the broader story of the modern monarchy. Royal analysts increasingly described the evening as a turning point. Not because it changed constitutional realities overnight, but because it altered perceptions. Perceptions often matter enormously within royal life. Public confidence shapes influence. Influence shapes expectations. Expectations shape the future. In that sense, the banquet carried significance far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. It changed the conversation. It shifted attention. It encouraged millions of people to think differently about where the monarchy might be heading. As those conversations continued, Catherine's growing influence became increasingly difficult to deny. Her role was expanding not through dramatic declarations, but through a steady accumulation of trust and responsibility. Each appearance reinforced her standing. Each challenge seemed to strengthen public respect. What had once been viewed as potential was now being discussed as reality. The future queen was no longer simply preparing for an eventual role. Many believed she was already helping shape the monarchy's present. That perception naturally brought William into the discussion as well. More and more, conversations about the future image of the crown revolved around the partnership between William and Catherine. Together, they represented continuity, renewal, and stability. For supporters of the monarchy, they embodied hope. For observers analyzing the institution's future, they appeared increasingly central to whatever came next. Their importance seemed to grow with every passing month. Yet even after all the analysis, countless questions remained unanswered. What further changes might lie ahead? Had the banquet been an isolated gesture or part of a broader strategy? Would future events reinforce the message many believed Charles had sent? The uncertainty ensured that fascination would continue long after the headlines faded. The story was far from over. What remained undeniable, however, was the lasting impact of that evening. Years from now, historians and royal commentators may look back on the banquet as a moment when shifting dynamics became impossible to ignore. A moment when public perception changed. A moment when the future appeared to step forward and claim its place. Whether intentional or not, King Charles had created a defining chapter in the ongoing story of the monarchy. And as the palace lights faded and the final guests departed into the London night, one thing seemed clear. King Charles had sent a message the entire world could see, and the consequences of that message were only just beginning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.